Morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well on this lovely gray, kind of rainy, drizzly morning. It's a break from the heat, at least. Anyway, a few days ago, Wendy told a story about her family going up a mountain in a cable car and then really having to rely on faith to get them back down again after some unfortunate turns in the wrong direction. Well, her story made me think of my own cable car adventure, and I thought I would share it with you today as our devotion. It was a few years back when I was on a trip with my conference to the Holy Land. We had a really lovely and a very busy time and saw so many things that it's kind of hard to remember them all. But one day stood out in a very unexpected way to all of us. We had gone to see one of the major sites in Israel, Masada, an ancient fortress which was the site of a tragic story in Israel's past. I'll let you look that up on your own if you don't know it. In any case, Masada is set way up on top of a plateau surrounded by these steep cliffs that fall off on every side, an ideal place to put a fortress, really. And while there are some steep, narrow paths that switch back up the side of the cliff, the normal way to get up there nowadays is by cable car. So that's what our group did, along with loads of other tourists that day. Now, I don't like cable cars much at all, but I dealt with the ride up and was glad to get to the top. And we had a lovely tour around the site. I learned a lot about a place I hadn't really heard of before, and of course took all sorts of nice pictures. I'll try to include some of them either in the description or in the comments somewhere. Anyway, when it was time to go, we were all standing in line waiting for the cable car to take us back down again, slowly moving forward in the long queue, when after a while, the queue stopped moving. Now, I figured that there was a loading issue and we just were going to have to wait it out. But after about half an hour of not moving, it was clear it was more than a loading issue. Eventually, the word made its way throughout the line that the cable cars were not working. They couldn't get them to work to go at all, which to someone who doesn't like cable cars to begin with was slightly terrifying. At that point, I had no desire to ever get back in that thing again. But we didn't have much choice but to wait. There was the hiking trail down the cliff, of course, but several in our group were not in the sort of physical shape that would make trekking down the side of a mountain very easy. So we waited, and waited some more. Eventually, more and more people started to leave the line to try their hand at the trail. We got closer and closer to the front of the line, but there was still no sign of progress on the cable car front. And I, for one, did not particularly fancy being first in line to try out this cable car that had mechanical issues. So, more of us in our group started to talk about taking the trail. Now, there wasn't much point, aside from relieving my anxiety, to us going unless the whole group was going to go on together. It wasn't going to save us any time if one half had to wait for the other. But as time continued to go on, even the physically weakest among us could see that going down that trail was perhaps a better option. And so, when the eldest in our group, a wonderful lady in her 70s, insisted that she was prepared to go down that mountain, the decision was made. And it was not an easy trek. The trail was indeed very narrow. We had to travel single file the whole way, and it was very long, running back and forth across this steep cliff face, and we had to go very slowly, especially on the turning points where the path could get very steep and slippery with loose stones everywhere, with the threat of a sheer drop-off not that far away. And it was hot. The sun was blazing. I ended up with a nasty sunburn myself. But despite the hardship of the trail, for all of us, it became the defining moment of our trip. Not because of the difficulty, but because of the companionship and the solidarity we felt along the way. Not only were the least able willing to put themselves in a riskier situation for the betterment of the group, but the more able adapted their pace to suit the others, depending on their strengths at the time. Some went on ahead as quickly as they could to walk down the long road at the bottom of the cliff back to the tourist center, requesting a car drive up to meet the weakest when they made it to the bottom, to save them the extra long walk. Others made sure to go back and forth along the line as they were able, traveling, waiting as people passed, then catching up with others, asking if everyone was okay, offering the extra water and snacks that these extra prepared people had packed in their bags. Others stayed at the very back of the line, traveling at the pace of the slowest, offering a steady hand on the tricky bits. One of the images that sticks out to me the most was one of the younger guys who had made his place right in front of that elderly lady, standing directly in front of her on the steepest bits, having her place her hands on his shoulders so they could walk slowly down together, with her using him as a sort of living walking stick. And of course, there was our bishop who was leading the trip, who came in last, making sure that no one was left behind. In the days that followed, after we did all make it down safely, we kept coming back to that hour and a half on the mountain, both to marvel at the craziness of the situation, but more to think on how wonderful it was to see everyone coming together to help each other out, to bear one another's burdens. Not only in our group, but among so many of the people walking down that trail, we kept seeing people from all over the world trying to help each other in whatever way they could. It was such a prime example of people working on behalf of their neighbor, of people coming together to care for each other. It was an inspiration to young and old alike. Wendy mentioned the other day the importance of faith in getting us down those tricky mountains. What I saw on Masada was faith. We were certainly praying without ceasing, but also the other side of faith, a commitment to loving our neighbor, to coming together to help each other down the mountain. We need both to get us through, both the faith that inspires us and comforts us, as well as the commitment we have in response to caring for one another in all situations, to responding to all that we've been given by giving it back to those around us in whatever way we can. All of us have been stuck on the top of a mountain for the past several months, and we're starting to look at that steep and winding road back down, not really sure of how tricky the path might be. But as we face it, we not only face it knowing that our faith can see us through, but also knowing that we have each other, both to help and to rely on. And despite the craziness of the situation, we will make it back to flat ground again. Oh, and I should tell you, after an hour and a half of trekking down that mountain, which had followed a good 45 minutes to an hour of waiting in the line, we finally made it back on the bus to go back to our hotel. And as we looked back at the tourist center as we were driving off, that cable car still had not moved, which just goes to show that sometimes the harder road is the better one. So y'all, take care and stay safe. Bye.